Welcome to the Racing Lanes podcast. I'm your host, Rico Muhammad. I'll be joined shortly by my co-host, Mr. Chuck Snow. And we're having a good friend of the show is joining us this evening, Mr. Bruce Outridge of the Lead Pedal podcast. They're going to be joining us in a few minutes. But without any further ado, we're going to jump into this week's DAT trend lines report. We're showing that the national average price of diesel fuel is still kind of creeping slowly, still creeping on up there. It crept up ever so slightly by 0.3 percentage points. So we're showing that the national average price for diesel fuel is at $5.72 per gallon. California produce volumes at the lowest level in 20 years. As of last week, June's truckload produce volume in the Golden State was 29% below the average June truckload volume going back to 2000. That equates to just over 58,000 loads. That has substantially impacted reefer rates this produce season following last week's 3 cents per mile increase in the national average for reefer spot rates. In non-pandemic years, reefer line haul rates typically increase by 18 cents per mile during June. This year, they've dropped by 7 cents per mile from the month to date, but are still 21 cents higher than they were at the same time of pre-pandemic average this time last year. But that doesn't do much to help out when the diesel fuel has been increased as much as it hasn't increased. So with that being said, and without any further ado, let's jump into the national averages, and I'm going to see if I can share my screen so to allow you guys to see what I'm seeing. We're showing that the national averages by region for dry vans coming out of the northeastern corridor, that average outbound rate comes in at $2.44 per mile. Moving down to the mid-Atlantic and southeastern states, we're showing an average outbound rate of $2.80 per mile. Moving up into the Midwest, that number jumps down to $2.78 per mile. Moving out of the South Central region, we're showing an average outbound rate of $2.74. And coming in out of the West Coast, we're showing an average of $2.63. Shifting gears and jumping over to the flatbed portion of the report, we're showing an average outbound rate for flatbeds coming in at $3.36 per mile out of that northeastern corridor. Moving down to the mid-Atlantic and southeastern states, we're showing an average outbound rate of $3.77. Moving out of the Midwest, we're showing an average outbound rate of $3.64 for flatbeds. Moving out of the South Central region, we're showing an average outbound rate of $3.46. And wrapping up, coming out of the West Coast, that average checks in at $2.97. And moving over, changing gears, talking about reefer and temperature control, we're showing that coming out of the Northeast, the average outbound rate shows at $2.62. Moving out of the Mid-Atlantic and Southeastern states, we're showing an average outbound rate of $3.08. Moving out of the Midwest, we're showing an average outbound rate of $3.14. Coming out of the South Central region of the United States, we're showing that average outbound rate checks in at $3.16. And closing out, coming out of the West Coast, we're showing an average outbound rate checking in at $3.10 per mile. And with that being said, I'm gonna see if I can shut down my screen here. We'll go back to regular mode, and we're gonna welcome my co-host, Mr. Chuck Snow, to the show. Good evening, Chuck. How are you?
We're doing well. How are you, Rico?
I cannot complain. Doing well. Kind of excited to talk about tonight's show. I guess there's no need to really make a big to-do about it, but let's go ahead and welcome our guest, Bruce Outridge and the Lead Pedal podcast to the show as well.
Hey, I'm trying to bring all of our friends on at the same time. Try to share.
That's quite all right. Do what you do. We're
Try to share.
We're going to kind of talk a little bit. So for everybody tuning in, if you got a question or if you got a comment that you want to chime in, drop it down in the chat. You can write it in the chat. Hopefully we'll be able to see it over here on this end. and we'll highlight your question or whatever it is you have to say tonight. There's not really a particular format in per se. We're going to just talk about what's going on in the industry, and we'd love to hear some feedback from you guys, ladies and gentlemen out there, that kind of tell us what you guys are experiencing, what you are seeing as far as freight levels, what's going on with your cost of operations. We'd love to be able to hear from you guys and know what you are experiencing on your end. With that being said, Chuck, I didn't get, I kind of rushed it, but I want to welcome you to the show as well, and tell us a little bit about what's been going on with you and you guys up at Traffics.
You know what? Things have been really busy. Of course, we've seen there's been some compression with freight rates, of course, but overall freight volumes for the type of food products we're handling, especially, and some of the government initiatives we've had with certain government contracts we've had, they've all kept everybody pretty busy. We're hopping, but we are seeing. I'd be lying to say if I haven't seen compression in rates in certain lanes. Anyways, the Canadian outbound still seems to be pretty strong. That's held its own. Inbound has died down a little bit.
Well, we got a hot topic right off the bat.
Oh yeah,
Gino sends us one. What's the take on AB5?
Well, I wish Hank Seaton was here because he.
Yeah, what is AB5? You want to explain that one? I'm not familiar with that term.
Yeah. So that's an undertaking that started in California,
Okay.
where they're really trying to outlaw the independent owner operator, along with Uber drivers.
Okay, so that's the driver Inc. issue that we have up here. Then that's what that. Yeah,
it's very similar, except they're just trying to out. So if you are if you're a driver and you are leased on with if you're leased on with a company like our Traffic's drivers that own their own trucks and they're lease operators, they own their own equipment, but according to AB5, that is illegal. They want those drivers to actually work for Traffic's on our payroll. And that goes the same as to outlaw Uber and all these other gig industries. And it's kind of a last ditch effort, I would think, by some of the unions to try to gather around all the troops and get everybody fired up. There's some talk about it. There's pushback in the courts that some of the courts are realizing that this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
It is dangerous. The owner operator model, I think, has been around for years, for 70 years, where companies have owner operators and even some private carriers have people leased on with them hauling their product. And that would, if AB5 came through, that would be illegal. And I think that in a lot of cases, produce is hauled by those companies, those small carriers that have a couple of company trucks and they have lease operators leased on. That's who hauls an awful lot of produce. And I think that there would not be a lot of companies left hauling much of our fresh fruits and vegetables if this happened.
Yeah.
So I think it's pretty dangerous. It's much, I think it's much more precarious even than our WSIB, which is a whole other thing I don't even want to touch tonight, which is our whole thing here with Driver Inc., which is a whole other topic. But I don't know, Rico, what do you think about what's going on with this AB5 bill?
I think it's a bad deal for true independence. I think it's an attack on the owner operator model. I think that we have to be more. Some of these things that I'm trying to think of the correct way of how I want to word this. A lot of these things, unfortunately, I think we've brought some things on ourselves by not being as sophisticated as we probably need to be. you have to understand, when you are a business, no one there's it's being a business entity and being a quote unquote regular citizen or consumer, uh, we're governed by different sets of rules. There's no one that's going to be holding your hand. You have to look out for your own best interests. And if you're not wise enough or smart enough and intelligent enough to kind of always be looking out for your own best interests and not allowing um, to be talked into or coerced into accepting just what's given. And I think that sometimes from the standpoint of the small guys, I think that's what's happening. I think that a lot of people are saying, hey, these big companies are taking advantage of us small guys. And not to say that they are not to say that that's not the case, but the small guy has to be savvy enough to understand when someone is pissing on them and telling them that it's rain, and understanding that it's actually to use that.
Well, you know what? The problem is, Rico. It's fairly easy to become an owner operator, and we see a lot of the fleets here. Chuck would know that. Even though you're buying the truck, you come onto a lot of fleets, and the guys are not prepared. They don't understand that they're in business. They may pay for the truck, but half the time they don't have fuel money, or they don't have tires, and the company's always feeding them or whatever. That model needs to be stronger. Every lawyer or insurance agent I've heard talk at, and I'm part of a lot of associations that I've heard them talk about owner operators, they're always saying, make sure you have very strong contracts to show that there's independence there, because a lot of them, it's very gray area. They even do the safety. They shouldn't even be doing the safety meetings for owner operators. They should be offering it through a third party and saying, you need, it's the owner operators deal is to keep up with their safety. But what they do is they want to make sure they protect their insurance rights as well. So they're leaping them in with all the drivers, and we have a safety meeting every year or whatever. But that's where the gray area is beginning. And now Driver Inc. is even worse. You get into lease to own programs, which we have a couple here, never plans, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
We have those which are even grayer. Again, they're giving you the truck and then treating you like an owner operator. And that's caused Driver Inc. And people don't understand. I hear it a lot from owner operators, because I deal with a lot of independent owner operators. And a lot of them say, you know what, the company is taking all the money. Well, you have to realize that behind the scenes, and I'm not saying there's not some that are doing that, but behind the scenes, the company's also doing your fuel tax. They're doing dispatch. There's a lot of people that have to be paid behind the scenes.
Yeah, the tolls
with that other $2 that you're not seeing. So
right.
The contract was for $5 a mile. How come I'm only getting paid $1.50? And they go, we're being ripped off. Well, no. If all these other things are taken care of and on your behalf, that's why. If you want to take care of all that, then become an independent owner operator with your own authority. And there's two different words there. And then get your $5 a mile, and you pay for all that stuff. It's going to probably cost you the same, right?
I have to say, though, Bruce, in fairness to everybody, I think that the business acumen that I am seeing for the most part today is much better than ever from what I'm seeing from Canadian owner operators. They seem to be more business savvy. They seem to know their numbers. You can tell right away when you talk to an owner operator and you talk about fuel, and you say, what's it running you? What's your fuel mileage, or what's it costing you a mile for fuel? And if they don't have that answer right at the tip of their tongue, then there's something wrong. But about 98% of them can tell you to the penny what it's running them for fuel.
That's good. They need to know that.
Well, I'm glad to see that, because there was a time when most of them, well, I don't know, really depends. Well, it depends on a lot of things. We've got Gene right back here. A lot of folk want this microwave business to get into trucking. Some get into these lease purchase deals, don't seek any legal representation to understand the contracts, sign the dotted line, then stuff goes south. They blame everyone except themselves. Well, good point. There seems to be, I couldn't agree more, there seems to be a cast of characters all the time that want to sign up for these lease agreements, as Bruce just said, the never plan. They kind of remind me, if you've ever been out west, some of the bars have those bulls that electric bulls or whatever in the taverns and in the bars, and guys get drunk and get on this bull, and it bucks them off, and another drunk is waiting to get on. And that's what these lease operators remind me of. Because
I was waiting to see how you were going to bridge that from owner operator to the bulls out in Texas. I was waiting to see how that was going to happen.
But guys, you got to agree that you have people that lose their, they give up on these trucks. And some of them have only been in it for 2 months, some have been in it for 20 months. They give up on a truck, and there's a lineup of people waiting to try their hand at it.
Yeah, because they gave them a 2022 Peterbilt at $250,000 with nothing down.
Yeah.
The guy works for 2 years and goes, "Oh well, I've had a couple people come out and go, oh, I lost 80 grand in that." I go, well, no, you ran as an owner operator. You didn't pay for the truck up front. First thing I tell everybody, if you can buy a truck independent of the company, that's the way you should go. Because if you don't like the area, you're in trouble if it's leased on. Now, I'm not saying all lease programs are bad. I know.
No, there's some really good ones out there. I agree.
Saying that people need to kind of do their homework. And if you're not putting anything down on a $250,000 Peterbilt and expect you're going to pay that off in 4 years, you're dreaming. Like, I mean, that's,
look at the interest charges. Guys.
One thing that I'll just say, for people coming into the industry, or that's thinking about it, measure twice, cut once. Do a little bit more research. Find out a little bit. Don't just take everybody right now, especially on social media. Media marketing, they're advertising all of these courses, getting in the trucking industry, make fortunes in trucking and all this other different stuff. Ask those people what are their MC numbers. Most of these people, these quote unquote gurus, are making more money off these courses that they're selling you than they are off trucking. They don't really they're not really as well versed as they make themselves out to be. And the one thing is for sure is that they, we do a lot of stuff that's a lot of glitz and glam, the shiny object, and you got a lot of people that are doing a lot of stuff that, I don't 100% agree with, but it's really sad when you see people, they're marketing this stuff to people that are not really all that savvy to begin with, and people are thinking that, hey, well, this person did it, and I can do it too, and we're going to show you step by step. And there's no way in hell that anybody in any kind of course, I don't care how thorough the course is going to be able to show you all of the different pitfalls that you're going to run into in this industry. Most of you will understand, especially if you came into this industry and you train, you understand that when you were with your trainer, you didn't necessarily go through all the stuff that you experienced as a driver in this industry. So when you started, and probably the first day that you got in the truck by yourself alone, you experienced something that you never experienced while you were with your trainer. The same rule and logic you should apply to these quote unquote gurus that are out here selling you these $3,000 and $4,000 courses on trucking and dispatching and all this other stuff. You getting into stuff, getting involved with people that I don't think have necessarily have the greatest of track records. They're making more money off of trying to market this course to you than they really are making in the transportation industry.
So
like I said, one way to probably vet them, ask them for their DOT numbers, ask them for their MC numbers. Go look on FMCSA and see if they actually really do have a company. What is the safety rating of the company that they have? Like, go look up the public information. If they are so well versed at it, then there should be some success leaves footprints. I'm not trying to say that that all of them are snake oil salesmen. Just most of them are snake oil salesmen.
Yeah, and you know what? There's a lot of good people out there that will give good information. One of the things that starts the whole thing sideways is when you're talking about hauling freight in this market, or even the market we just came out of, with a power unit that costs $250,000. Yep. That doesn't make any sense. That's right off the bat. It doesn't matter unless you won a lottery or you came into a giant inheritance. Where the heck is an owner operator, even somebody that owns a trucking company, unless they're hauling, some really heavy stuff or expensive stuff, where does somebody justify $250,000 for a power unit?
Right. And another thing that unfortunately, back when I got into this industry, one of the biggest things, big help, Kevin Rutherford would always talked about getting into the industry with a cheap truck, which kind of at first it would counterproductive to what my initial thinking was, because I was thinking, hey, I need a nice new pretty truck or whatever, and not really understanding business like I really should understand the business, that you try to keep your costs down as much as you possibly can. And if you can find it, and unfortunately in this market, give yourselves about 6 more months. These trucking prices are starting to come down. They're not coming down as fast as we probably would like to see them, but the the truck prices are starting to come down. The trailer prices are starting to come down. All of this stuff, because I really personally, I would hate to go out here and buy a new piece of equipment right now at these prices that they have met, and with the cost that's associated with operating a truck right now. It is going to be very difficult to maintain and be profitable in these type of market conditions right now. If you're paying premium top dollar for trailers and trucks for what the prices that I've been seeing advertised at, it's going to be very, very, very tough sledding to get to be profitable right now.
Well, you have the cost of the power unit that's up. If you have to supply your own trailer, that cost is up. Cost of fuel is way up. Cost of insurance is creeping up there as well. Freight rates are creeping down. Where are you going to make money?
Right.
You're going the wrong
it's really difficult. I want to try to change gears just a little bit. We're going to kind of stay on that. If someone has a question or want to chime in on that, we can stay on that. But I want to shift gears just a little bit. Talk about the supply and demand trends. We get a little report from DAT, little inside report that they send us over. The MCI, the Market Conditions Index dry van report. Truckload demand is still higher than this time last year. But we have here that the latest durable goods manufacturer shipment inventories and orders reports that the freight volume hasn't declined yet, according to Census Bureau. New orders for manufactured durable goods in May increased by $1.9 billion or 0.7% to $267.2 billion, up 7 of the last 8 months. And this increase followed a 4% April increase. Last month's increase reflected a 1.1% rise in machinery orders. That's some inflation behind the increase in those orders, but nevertheless, there are a lot of dollars flowing through the economy right now. And so that comes from the chief economist, Christopher Rupkin. Yeah, Rupke. I'm probably butchering his name, but we apologize, but we appreciate the information, Chris.
I should have worn
well delivered.
I got Louisville.
Well, you know what? We still have the supply chain issues all over the place. That's affecting. It's affecting everybody. And yeah, I would imagine there's new machinery orders because people have been holding off buying machinery because they couldn't get it.
Yeah, your machinery order is just 3 years behind right now.
Yeah.
You're not getting it now. You could order it.
Well, you know what? It was very interesting. I was in a drugstore. It was Canada's largest drugstore chain yesterday, and I could not believe the lack of product on the shelves. It was mind-boggling. And this wasn't, this was shaving cream of all things. That's where I first noticed it.
That's the biggest thing, and we were talking a little bit before the show. And hopefully everyone, I think that we already know this in the trucker industry, but we are definitely headed for a recession. At least I believe we're strongly already in one. And I think that supply chain issues are still starting to compound, are still compounding on certain items. And I think that unfortunately, I think that this food situation is getting ready to be. I'm not quite understanding why. Um, Maybe you can. I don't know, Chuck, if you have any information on it. Why the produce is down as bad as it is coming out of the
Well,
West
I
Coast?
think part of it with produce, I think there's a couple of things. I think number one, California has been hit pretty hard with everything possible. And that's where a lot of this comes from. It's been hit with fires, it's been hit with floods, it's been hit with labor shortages, you name it, it's been hit. So it starts there. And I also think because of inflation, the cost of, if you've gone into a grocery store, I went into one today and a quart of, a little box of strawberries was $7.
Woo!
So
Yeah, avocados 2 for $6. I seen the other day.
yeah, but you know what? That box of strawberries this time of year, because we're right in the peak of Ontario strawberry season. That is double what it should be.
Yeah.
So when you look at the price of produce, and you look at how much money your average person is putting in their fuel tank just to get to work, that's certainly having an impact on how much fresh produce people are buying.
I would also wonder how many because a lot of the guys that haul that stuff are the independent,
Yes,
one truck, two truck operation. And I'm wondering how many of them, because I think California's had the highest fuel prices. If you had, you got reefer fuel, you got fuel for your truck, how many of them have just decided, maybe they found another lane for a little while because it's just not worth running their way. So we just have this problem on top of the problem, again, with guys saying, you know what, it's not even worth it. Like, we're not making any money running that way. Let's find another type of load to run, little shorter or something, or maybe not as much reefer fuel or whatever. I don't know.
Well, California does have restriction on age of truck, number one. You are correct in what you say about, just the way California is. And I would think that there's further problems. Just the fact that what usually gets everybody excited about California, besides for the volume, is the freight rates. You have these huge volumes which drive the freight rates up. It's like the first berries that come out of California, they'll pay $9,000 a load in bad times. Like in previous years. Now all of a sudden, we're not seeing that, and I think that's really that's affecting things. So I think it's a whole chain of events that's happening.
Yeah, the increased cost, and Gino brings up a good point, because along with the cost of fuel, the death is also that the price of death is increased as well.
Yeah, Gino, good point, because nobody ever talks about that. It's that hidden cost of putting death in your truck and your trailer. It's huge.
Yeah, that's another little a sneaking little cost that's in there, and I'm not sure. And I'm come to think about it, you know what? I didn't even have that. I dropped the ball on that. Brings up a very good point. I didn't even have that as a line item, death cost. I just had the cost of diesel fuel, but I didn't even have that as a line item on my cost of operation.
You may not want to stay in this, Rico, when you see that.
You go, another cost of operation.
So I might need to go back and crunch some numbers on my end.
Yeah, you may want to run, pull a flatbed or a dry van. But yeah, these are all, and especially when you're running California.
Yeah, that's the added cost there. That's an added cost to the newer trucks, which you got to have in order to run into California as well.
Right.
Rico, you can drive his old Mac around. There's no deaf in that cab over. He just you're good at like, you could just drive that up and down, and that'll take away that line item problem.
There's no air conditioning either. You die in that thing. People aren't as tough as we used to be.
Maintenance is going down right now.
So Bruce, you've been I've been noticing you've been at a couple of different truck shows and everything.
Just
What are some things that you've been seeing out there while you've been making the rounds?
probably one of the biggest. I mean, fuel is on everybody's topic, and I think that's why the conversation over electric trucks has become so big. That's been huge up here. I don't know if Chuck's been seeing that, but at Truck World, it was all about electric trucks. It's all I've been seeing, talking about. I don't know whether that's going to work for the long term or the long.
Well, it works great for regional,
but it's going to work for some people. And I know with the rise of the fuel prices, it's made a lot of companies investigate it further. I'm not saying they're going that way, but they are certainly starting to really look at the books and see what's going on with that. So that's the big conversation we hear here. Other than recruiting, which is always around, nobody can find drivers. If you know of anybody, and I think we're going to have to change, with the California AB5 bill in there. And then we're talking Driver Inc. up here, which is a very similar issue, and the owner operators. And I think we're going to have to see a different model for the driver. And I'm not sure, we're kind of getting away from that whole pay per mile, because a lot of drivers, because of waiting time, and I think the pandemic showed us waiting time, and e-logs have shown us waiting time. I'm waiting to see what's going to happen now, because as of July 1st, if you don't have the ticket to drive a shift transmission, standard transmission, then so what's that going to do to a lot of these drivers? And there's a lot of them in school right now that I'm not sure where I'm not sure where this is going to go. It's going to really, I think there's going to be a different kind of driver pool required.
Bruce, can we elaborate on this for a second? Because for our listeners who reside outside Ontario, let's just talk about that new law that came in July 1st, just so everybody's on the same page.
Yeah. So if someone goes to take their license for a Class A, or I guess Class D would be considered the same thing, which is our commercial driver's license, same as a CDL, we call it a Class A up here. If someone goes to take that, if they take the test in an automatic truck, then on their license will be a restriction showing that they can only drive an automatic truck, which 75% of the fleets up here, I think, have automatic. The big fleets, they have that. But what I heard was a big problem was, yeah, you have an automatic truck, but when it breaks down, we send you the other truck that's the spare in the yard, and that may not be automatic. And I think it's going to, over the years, we've been talking about this as skilled trade, and, having some kind of upgrade system for drivers, so you can see where you're progressing in your career, kind of like they do for skilled trades. For electrician, you get tickets or whatever it is.
Yep.
So I think we're kind of going there on our own, whether we want to or not, and it's going to force us to come up with a system to say, oh, you've only got an automatic transmission, you can only get hired fleet. The problem is we already have the problem with insurance that's causing a lot of people to not be qualified for a job now. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out in the near future.
Yeah, I think that it's already it's like that here, automatic restrictions. So that's already something that's already down here.
Yeah. What I don't like about it, though, and I don't know what, Rico, tell me what it's like in the States. What I don't like about it here is that if you want to move up to, so let's say you get trained on a manual transmission, I now have to go back through this whole drive test situation to be tested. Like, it should be somewhere where, yes, I agree that you need to have training on that, but it should be something that can be signed off. I don't know, without going, our drive test system here is already a mess with new people going through. They can't get bookings now. You start adding people who are trying to upgrade a test or something like that, and it's going to be just a mess out there. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I don't know. I've heard that you have to go back to get retested. I don't know if it's the same in the States, but if your company was to train you on that and show somehow through a test or certificate that you were qualified, I understand there might be some issues with.
I'm not sure about as far as the Canadian portion of it, but a lot of the drivers here, especially going through schools here in the United States, they have third-party testers, and a lot of people are doing so it's not necessarily a thing of going to the DMV outright. They're using the third-party testers in order to do that. But now I'm ignorant when it comes to if they're trying to upgrade or something like that. I really can't speak to that with any authority.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because if you look at the way in the States, from what I understand, you guys have your tanker endorsement and all
Right,
of that
right.
on your license. Well, if someone passes their tanker endorsement, then doesn't run tanker for 10 years, they're no better off than a brand new person who's never run it before. I mean, they may have the knowledge of what's going to happen, but they're probably kind of rusty. They need a refresher somewhere, and so isn't it better to have it where people can kind of get that refresher? I know I still teach at some of the training schools. I teach class training, and the first thing I tell them is, learn on a manual transmission, test on a manual transmission, and go open board as soon as you can. Experience everything. I don't like people doing this step thing, which, I'm going to work local for 2 years, then I'm going to go on the highway. No, you're going to forget everything we taught you. Go on the highway now, get it.
Right.
And
But
then,
then, you know what? A lot of companies won't do it because of insurance, number one. Number two, as far as the manual transmission versus automatic, number one, most of the fleets are going, especially the larger fleets, even some of the smaller ones, they're all going automatic. And
Right.
and young people that want to get into the industry don't get any opportunity whatsoever these days unless they're fortunate enough to be around a farm or they have a relative that has a truck, because everything is just pretty much automatic. Even if they go in the military, the military learned about 20, 30 years ago not to put clutches in vehicles because it was costing them a fortune.
yeah.
So everything's automatic there too.
And they're taking all the industry. What are you going to do if you don't have to shift? This is why people are falling asleep while they drive down the road. They don't have to shift. They got a recliner as their driver's seat. You put your feet up, and I
got to tell you something, Bruce.
All my friends in a car will be sleeping in 5 minutes if they're in the passenger seat, but they can drive for 20 hours with a twin stick Mac.
I've seen it's been a real thing lately of seeing truck drivers with their left foot up on the dash.
Oh, it's the biggest complaint I'm seeing from drivers, are saying that the new drivers have this thing where they're putting the feet up. I don't know about you guys. I know I'm a little overweight, but there's no way I'm getting my feet back down to the brake if I.
No. And
I don't think nobody has that good of a reaction time.
I've never put my foot up on that dash. In fact, feet on the dash are not allowed in my trucks. There was a strict rule about that, but yeah, I'm hearing that. I'm hearing drivers are complaining. Drivers are complaining about the new drivers getting out to places. Like in Ontario here, we have a no chain. You're not allowed to chain your truck, but you run into California, they're finding people in Denver who don't know how to chain up their truck. So it's, how do we get all of this together? I mean, I feel bad for a new person. Everything I learned.
That's why they're not coming on, Bruce. That's why we have a shortage of drivers, because you know what? You're a thinking human being. We haven't made it easy. And somebody that's looking for a career, unless they're like the three of us and had a love for the road, a young person looking for for their career may not pick trucking because it's got a lot of weird oddities to it still.
Yeah. I know we need to do more of that. We need to put the fun back in it. I was telling this to a class the other day.
It's true.
Fun. I told them there used to be bars at the truck stop. Now, I'm not saying we should be drinking and driving going down the road, but it used to be fun when you got laid over somewhere. Now it's not fun anymore. So
yeah, no. And you hear horror stories. I think we've all heard the horror story of the two guys somewhere in Texas or somewhere that were laid over for a weekend at a truck stop, and they were way at the back. And they were shining up their truckers, and somebody pulled a hibachi, and they got pinched for impaired driving.
Yeah.
You hear those stories.
They pulled out a what?
They had a little hibachi barbecue and a couple of beers. They were laid over for the weekend somewhere in South or West Texas, and because they were in what appeared to be care and control of the vehicle, they both got busted for impaired driving. Now, whether this is true or not, I guess one of our experts could shed some light on. But the fact that this is an urban legend, some young man or woman that's hearing this story may say, you know what? I think I'm going to be a plumber or a mechanic or a nurse or something else.
Well, no, I'm going with Justice. I'm going with Justice and Gino because they're in the party row going, hell yeah. Look at these comments. I'm partying with these two. They know what they're doing. You know what they've done is they've taken. I was telling this to a class the other day. I said they've taken the common sense out of it.
Yes.
We had bars at the truck stops, but we were not stopping every night drinking at these bars. It was a once in a blue moon if you got held over or something like that. But for the most part, there was camaraderie in the industry. We used to wait for each other. We used to help each other.
Yes.
We used to, if I said go from here to Windsor, which is 4 hours away, and I say, oh, just take the 401 to Windsor, I don't mean stay in the center lane all the way to Windsor. I mean, kill the right lane, and if there's exits, you have to come out. And this is what trucking is. Trucking is decision making. You have to decide, is this the proper lane for me, or should I be over here? What's the best for me to be out of the way of everybody and still moving without having to slow down too much? So
that whole thing, that's gone now. People,
yeah.
young guys don't think that way.
The first thing I learned in 1979. The first thing they told me, stay in the right lane. You're a heavy truck. Stay out of the way.
That's right. Stay out of that. That center lane is your passing lane.
Yeah.
Use it for stuff. But you see, people today, and I guess a lot of people have this whole thing of entitlement.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I had a guy the other day. I followed him. I was going out to Markham to a client. This was at 5:30 in the morning. The truck did not have a speed limiter because he was passing everybody. He was in the hammer lane for the cars. He was the third lane he's not supposed to be in. And he was passing everybody uphill. He's obviously empty, but he was going much faster than 105 because I was behind him. And you know what? I've seen this 2, 3, 4, 5 times in the last month, I would say. I've seen guys pull out into that hammer lane, which is a $500 fine here. And they're not thinking about it because they're so frustrated. And what does that look like to the industry? You now have cars behind my wife who hates being behind 2 trucks. Now you're behind 3 trucks. You have nothing shoulder to go. And it's just crazy. I know we're speed limiters in the States. Rico, what's going on with that? That's what we want to be talking about.
What was that, Bruce?
What are we doing with speed limiters? Is it going through in the States there? We've already got them up here. You guys are talking about them down there.
I don't think it's going to pass. I could be wrong. I hope it doesn't pass. I think that a lot of people have voiced their opinions on it. It was open for comment on the FMCSA's website. I'm not sure if it's still open or not. I have to go maybe.
I think it's closed now.
It just shut down. Okay. But I hope it doesn't, because I think that we have to have the ability to be able to make adjustments as we need to make adjustments. I don't agree with running around 80 miles an hour or nothing like that. But I think that at the end of the day, you got to trust the guy and the girl that's behind the wheel to make the right decisions for the traffic conditions that are out there. Another thing is, the treatment that they actually putting on a lot of, look at all of the different social issues that are going on across the country and across the world. It still pales in comparison, in my humble opinion, the treatment of truck drivers at a lot of these shippers and receivers.
Yeah. I haven't heard I haven't heard any since the pandemic stopped. I haven't heard of any complaints, but that doesn't mean they're not there. They were not as boisterous as they were before.
I think it was a little worse during the pandemic when they weren't allowing, they were expecting drivers to drive all night and then they wouldn't allow them to use the restroom, things like that. And then they would get mad at the guy relieving himself in the parking lot. Well, what's he supposed to do?
Right. That's right.
They're not allowed to drop his trailer there. Come on, be reasonable, people.
Yeah. Back to Rico. I want to just talk about that speed. You just brought up a point about, leaving the control to the drivers, and that's what we used to have. We had speed limiters back. I ran for a carrier from 89 to 96, Big Pete's and everything. We had a company speed limit of 105 kilometers, which is 65 miles per hour. And this is back when in the States it was 65 and 60 and 55. So yeah, people weren't passing at 80, but we were allowed to go above that if we had to. Our trucks were not cut back. We had the power if we need to, but if you did that more than 10% over the month, you had to download the data. Every time we fueled up in the yard, we downloaded this data at least once a week. And so they knew when you were speeding. They know exactly. And if you were doing it too much, they called you in and you had to cut back. But they left it to you. So if you had to get around somebody or you had to use that to move, to be safe, because sometimes you're actually safer going faster and getting
absolutely
person than you are behind them. So, I agree. That's what they need to go back to. And I think they should do that here. Governing all the trucks has made it a mess here. They should just leave it to the drivers. We wouldn't have half of this backlog if we didn't have the speed limiters set where everybody is the same.
It's causing the backlog because the first truck's doing 105 kilometers an hour, which is about 65 miles an hour. If you've got 100 trucks, by the time that 100th truck is at the back of the line, he's lucky to be doing 50 miles an hour.
If that.
Yeah, I'm not exaggerating.
Yeah, no, it's gone. So I don't know. I think that's what trucking's missing. All of this, what we've been talking about actually since we started the show, has been basically the decision making of either the owner operator or the driver. And we're taking all of that out now. We're saying just be this model, go in the truck, and this is the problem. Trying to, when I heard about the speed limiter, and even back when they did the ELDs in the States and the regulations they were when they changed the split sleeper rule.
That was a big one. Yeah.
I thought, you know what? You're taking all the flexibility out. So we're an industry of total flexibility between traffic and weather and detention time and loading and border delays and whatever else crosses your path that day are all variables. And you're trying to run us as though we're this one model that must go this way. And this is why everybody's getting frustrated. The whole idea of trucking is the flexibility. We want the flexibility to not be in an office. We want the flexibility to sleep when we want to sleep and drive when we want to drive. And that's the way it was. And that's the way that it's got to come back to, or else we're never going to attract anybody. They're telling you when to sleep. I ran Jersey. I was just telling this to a class the other day. I used to run Jersey 3 times a week from Toronto here, and I ran split sleeper all the time. It's the only way you can make money. I could not imagine having to shut down for 10 hours at any customer that I was with. When I think about where I used to go, 7-8 hours you can get away with. You got in there by midnight, it was 8 o'clock by the time you're unloaded type thing. But 10 hours, like you're waking up at noon. It's like, there's no way.
Yeah, where are you going then? By the time you get to your backhaul, pick up your backhaul, you know what? Your day's done.
Yeah, like I don't understand why a good idea. And they're bringing things back, especially on our side here. They've gone back to splits, and that's the way you have to run. If I got more than 5 hours sleep, that was a vacation day.
I think the whole thing going back to the ELD was that had to do with plaintiff bar, these nuclear settlements, insurance companies. Everybody pushed for that because there was, paper logs had been around since I think the 20s or the 30s. There was a lot of wiggle room. Let's face it. There were people, not saying everybody, but there were people taking advantage of it. And it was just better for everybody to go to a level playing field.
Yeah, and I've got no problem with an ELD. I actually like them. I think they're good. But even with an ELD, this makes it even more important for you to be a decision maker because you have to decide, is this a time when I shut my truck off or keep my truck running? Do I sit in the passenger seat, the driver's seat, or do I go into the bunk where I can now log in a sleeper berth? This is all decision making, which people don't think about. My class the other day, I could have done a whole class on how to cheat your hours, and I'm not even cheating your hours. I'm making you think. I got into rolling recaps the other day. They almost fell down. They haven't even heard. Like they go, don't you have to take a reset? Not if you know how to do a rolling recap.
That's
right.
Never.
Bruce, Rico and I have talked about this 1,000 times on this show. We'll make it 1,001 tonight. I think part of the whole issue with this, with the whole industry, is we're still trying to run the way we always did, and it's broken. First of all, if trucks are really going to be, I know that even a nice Volvo is $200,000 or a Freightliner. So I guess 250 for a big long nose Pete isn't that insane, but although I think it is. But if we're going to only be able to use that truck for 11 hours a day, or even 14 hours a day of running over a 24-hour period, it's a bad use of capital. So I think we're going to have to go to another system, way back to what we did way back in the old days when I got into this. The big carriers back in the day, Smith Transport, may they rest in peace, and all the rest of them, Maisland and the rest of them, those guys ran out 200 miles, 250 miles, and came back, and they ran relays. And I think we've got to go back to that. I think trying to make anything else work is not going to work. This way you can pay drivers by the hour. The driver has, one of the biggest things I hear from drivers is they want set time. They want to know when they're going to be home. You can't do that when you're running California or you're running Seattle. You have no idea when you're coming home. And I think that knowing that you're going out for 200 or 250 miles and back for 250 miles, you're going to be back home in your bed that night. And I think that's what we're going to have to do.
Yeah, we had someone come by your booth at the last job fair. They wanted 10 hours sleep because they had a kid at home. On the weekends they stayed up, so they wanted to get 10 hours sleep every night on the road. Now, I've never had that happen. I'm not sure how you get that to happen, but it's like everybody's trying to make the most money, so they want a job that pays them the most money, but they don't want to do any work for it. And when
that's the key. You preaching to I'm gonna give you an amen right there. We're gonna pass the
I always said no. My rule. I was told this early on in my career, Rico. I was told when you go to work, especially in trucking, you go to work. So I didn't go to play. As much as I had fun on the road, I wasn't hanging out. I went out one of these truck stop every 2 miles or hanging out with my
making any money hanging out in truck stops.
No, but I went to work. So I left on Sunday, and depending on what was going on, I knew I was going to work for the week. That's what I signed up for. I could have come home many times, but when you get home, you get lazy, you eat dinner. Before you know it, you don't want to go out again. And I was telling the class the other day, I said, I used to run Cleveland 5 days a week, and that's 3,000 miles. You run 5 Cleveland, that's 3,000 miles.
That's trucking.
But you're back home. I could have been home every night, and I didn't even go home because I would come back, go, and it was a sweet deal. You unloaded, reloaded the same place on both ends. So you reload, and I would go back to the border and sleep because I was able to gain a trip every week doing that over somebody who went home at night,
right?
Doing the exact same miles and the same deliveries. And that's thinking ahead. And it's not that I didn't want to see my family. It's just, if I'm going to be gone from them, let's make it work. Let's make it worth your while to be paid and gone from them than doing kind of a half-ass thing that happens where, I go home, I come home every other night and wait for a while, and I'm only going to do 2 trips, and then you don't make any money at trucking. Well, not if you do it that way. You can't half play. You got to figure out what you're going to do. So, and I think that's why some of these programs that I'm hearing from my larger carriers they're doing like 7 and 7 off. So they're doing like, you run for a week, then you're off for a week. And that's starting to be very popular because people
but they're not making any money.
No, well, are you doing that to make money? Or are you doing that because you love trucking and you still want to stay in it, but you want to do something else?
Yeah, but then you're going to complain you're not making any money trucking.
That's right.
Because you're only working 50% of the time. Who makes money working 50% of the time?
It doesn't matter what industry you're in.
I know.
It doesn't. So, and you add truck payments and all that onto it. So, no, there's no, you either go to work or not. I'm not saying I never wanted to go for weeks on end. So I said, I'll go anywhere I can go in, 7, 8 days. I'm willing to do that. And I was home every weekend, but I still had fun on the road. Still was able to make those miles.
Sure. Yeah.
You're willing to run, you're going to make money.
Here's the thing too. This was a question, philosophical question. We're talking about trucking and we're talking about making money, but then at the same time, we're talking about rates. So after all, this is the Rates and Lanes podcast. Right. But at a certain point in time, like how much can we push raising rates before their pushback comes? Because I think that we're already headed for a recession. But where do we get to a point to where we was talking about strawberries earlier? How soon are people going to push back on how expensive that the cost of goods are because of transportation costs?
They're doing it right now. That's why you're not seeing the volume. That's one of the reasons you're not seeing the volumes of produce right now, is because not everybody can afford $7 for a box of strawberries. If you've got a family of 4, that's a lot of money for a little bowl of strawberries.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, I was talking I think that people are going after this past weekend, the 4th of July weekend. I think that the American public has gotten a serious wake up call. They've seen, going on road trips. They've seen how expensive fuel is across the nation. They see how expensive it was to buy food for the cookouts and everything else. And I think that, it's a culmination of things that's starting to come together. And people are really, I think these next couple of weeks are really going to start to see people really starting to raise a little more hell out here.
I agree. I saw something on the CBC News last night. They did a piece on it, and they showed the RV industry, which has been very strong up to and during especially during the pandemic. And now all of a sudden, the dealers are seeing a real cool off. And they interviewed some people, and people said, we love this RV, but you know what? We're still using it, but we're thinking twice before we take it out because it's costing us over $1 a mile for fuel. So we are using it, but we just don't use it. We use it very carefully.
Well, if you ever investigate that RV industry, so you've got a truck engine in those big RVs, so you're getting the same mileage as the other guys with a trailer. And if you've ever tried to park those RVs in Arizona or whatever, the amount they charge you for a spot is the same as a small apartment in Los Angeles. So it's like, if you haven't figured that part out, trust me, I was about to go into that whole live on the road in an RV thing. We thought about that years ago, and I dragged my wife to every RV show, and we started looking at it, and I'm looking at the prices of fuel, and we started investing what it costs to park in Arizona at these, RV parks or whatever. It was like $800 for a spot for 3 weeks. And it's like, I don't think so.
Yeah.
You add that up, plus your place at home, plus the cost of fuel, it's
I had no idea. It was that expensive.
Oh yeah.
This is a good business.
Look at the RV parks in Arizona. It'll blow your mind how much they charge you for that manicured lawn next to where you park.
Well, yeah, to water that lawn costs a fortune.
Well, I'm looking at the time, and we've blown through the hour. So, but Bruce, want to give you an opportunity to tell the good people how they can find you, where they can find you, and all that good stuff.
Well, thanks for having me on, guys.
Thanks for joining us. You're so much fun.
It's always so much fun. We've actually changed since the last time I was on here. On our social, we're Lead Pedal Media on everything now because we've got the radio station. So leadpedalpodcast.com if you want just the podcast. We're on all of the apps for podcast social. So Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Find me on LinkedIn. Just look me up. We got that.
All right, Bruce. Well, we appreciate you taking time to come and hang out with us and talk shop.
We got to do this in his Mac next time. I don't know why
I think we would die, man. There's not enough room.
you gotta get a mic out in that Mac, man. That's
Well, Chuck, let the good folks know how they can get a hold of you, and we'll find somewhere to park this thing until.
Okay. Best way for anybody to get a hold of me these days is probably send me an email, Chuck@Traffix, TRAFFIX.com. If you need to get set up as a carrier, if you're having some challenges in your business, whatever it is, if I can help you, I love helping our listeners. That's what I'm here for. Just reach out, leave me your phone number because sometimes it's much quicker for me to call you and we'll have a chat than it is to email back and forth. It's much more time effective. And with that, Rico, I'm going to let you back her in a hole right here for another week.
All right. Well, we appreciate it. Thank you guys, ladies and gentlemen, for taking a little time to hang out with us. You could have been anywhere else in the world, but you took a little time to hang out with us. We're always grateful that you did so. This has been the Racing Lanes podcast for my co-host, Chuck Snow, and our guest, Bruce Outridge. We want to thank you guys. Be safe, stay healthy, keep it in between the mustard and the mayonnaise, and we'll talk at you same time, same place next week.
And
God bless you and good night.
Justice and Gino, see you in the back row. See you.
Good night. God bless.
Thanks, guys.